You ever get that feeling like the news is just, well, it's all happening somewhere else?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Sometimes it's hard to connect with, especially foreign policy stuff, right?
Exactly.
Hmm.
But this thing with the Trump administration freezing foreign aid, well, this one hit me differently.
It's a big deal for sure.
Yeah, I was looking at this piece in Al Jazeera, and get this. Only 1% of U.S. spending goes to foreign aid.
Seriously?
1%.
Yeah.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
But now they're putting the brakes on almost all of it, except there are these exceptions.
Oh, yeah, the exceptions. Always exceptions.
Like Israel and Egypt. What's up with that? I mean, what are we diving into today?
Well, we got to unpack this whole freeze, right? Figure out what it means for, well, everyone. Global health, stability, the whole 9 yards. Plus, got to look into those exceptions.
Why those countries? What makes them so different? So if you're listening, you're thinking, foreign aid. What's that got to do with me? Trust me, by the end of this, you'll see why it matters big time.
Yeah, this isn't just some line item in a budget. It's a big sudden stop. No new commitments for at least 3 months. We're talking potentially axing whole programs, or at least major overhaul.
So not just a little trim, but a full-on
More like a full-on yank of the emergency brake.
yikes. And organizations, depending on that money.
Total chaos. These are groups doing crucial work all over the world, and now they're left hanging.
I bet that's why Oxfam America's been so vocal. They even said it's a straight-up threat to lives. And that this whole thing tosses out the idea that aid should be about need, not politics.
They have a point. This isn't a gradual shift, it's a sudden disruption, and that can have a domino effect. It's hard to even predict all the ways it'll play out.
Right, it's not just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. We're talking healthcare, clean water, famine relief, things that literally keep people alive. And when those things get disrupted, societies destabilize.
And what happens in one part of the world?
It eventually affects us all. We're all connected, even if it's not obvious right away.
And speaking of those vital services, there's one program that really stood out to me when I was reading about this. PEPFAR,
Ah, PEPFAR.
the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. This program has been huge, millions of lives saved since it started back in 2003. And it's had support from both Democrats and Republicans.
PEPFAR is a real success story. It's provided treatment and prevention for HIV/AIDS in the countries hit hardest by the epidemic. It's really been a lifeline.
But here's the thing. PEPFAR's funding is actually set to run out during this 3-month freeze.
Yeah, the timing on this couldn't be worse.
So if this freeze sticks around, or even becomes permanent.
We could be looking at a major setback in the fight against HIV/AIDS. It's a scary thought.
Okay, so big picture. Freeze on aid. But then they specifically said military funding for Israel and Egypt, that's going to keep flowing. Why single those two out, especially with all the human rights concerns surrounding both countries?
Let's be real. The U.S. has super deep ties with Israel and Egypt. We're talking strategy, history, politics, the whole shebang.
It's complicated.
Understatement of the year, these exceptions. They showed just how tangled up foreign policy can get. There are all these competing interests, and sometimes, yeah, those interests clash with humanitarian goals or calls for reform.
So how do you even begin to untangle that? Is there a way to make aid contingent on human rights improvements? Can you really do that?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? People have been arguing about that for decades.
And they probably will for decades more.
Right. Some say tying aid to human rights is the only way to make sure it's actually effective, that it pushes positive change. Others say, hold on, you might end up hurting the very people you're trying to help.
It's a tough one, that's for sure.
It is. No easy answers.
And this whole thing is sparking some strong reactions. I read that Jeremy Conondike, he's a former USAID official, called this freeze lunacy. Straight up. He even said people will die because of it.
Wow. Strong words.
Yeah, lunacy. But it shows you how high the stakes are, right?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. This freeze could do serious damage to America's reputation on the world stage. It could create tension with other countries. And the ripple effects. We could be feeling those for years to come in terms of global development and security. It really makes you step back and ask, what should America's role be in providing foreign aid? What should guide those decisions?
So where do we land? U.S. hits pause on most foreign aid. Huge worries about global health and stability. Then you've got these exceptions for Israel and Egypt, really highlighting how messy this whole aid thing can be.
It's a tangled web, that's for sure.
But here's something else to chew on. If the U.S. pulls back from foreign aid, who fills that gap?
Yeah.
What are their motives? What does the future of global aid even look like if the traditional players are backing away?
That's a question worth pondering, and it really makes you realize that this story, this aid freeze, it's just one piece of a much bigger, ever-changing story about power and responsibility on a global scale.
And that's a conversation we need to keep having.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening.
And thanks for diving deep with us.